A small Texas-based company came under heavy criticism after it released its version of the game Mahjong. The founders, 3 white women, are being accused of cultural appropriation. Mahjong is a game played with tiles comparable to chess. It has origins in the Qing dynasty in ancient China. Today, many variations exist across Asia. But the new so-called Mahjong Line is nearly unrecognizable. The flour tiles are replaced with packs of flour for baking, and bamboo tiles are replaced with the word bam. And it's not clear what these tiles are meant to fill in for.
I get it, Chinese is a difficult language to read, but not using them also reflects the fact that you are erasing an integral piece of Chinese culture. Beyond the whole cultural appropriation, experienced players know which tile they have simply by rubbing their thumb over it without even looking at it, and they're able to decide in a split second whether they want to keep or discard it.
These Mahjong sets, named cheeky and whimsical, are being sold for up to $425.
That was especially incredible to me. The fact that there are multiple hundreds of dollars for, it's offensive in a way that's almost like hard to put your finger on, except for the fact that, one of the hallmarks of cultural appropriation is profiting from culture.
The Mahjong Line founders claim that their set is specific to American Mahjong, but critics say that's irrelevant.
The history of Mahjong in America is short. It's tiny compared to the history of Mahjong in the world, in China. They think that they can sort of insulate themselves from their racism by creating a separate category.
The founders have since apologized, saying their approach to the game was, quote, hurtful to many, and we are deeply sorry. While our intent is to inspire and engage with the new generation of American Mahjong players, we recognize our failure to pay proper homage to the game's Chinese heritage. But is that enough? Many Asian Americans are saying this is just the latest example of cultural appropriation in America.
We've seen it many times in the past where white Americans sort of think they can, with a very limited relationship to Chinese culture, try to improve or update or clean, sanitize.
Another recent example of what some call the appropriation of Asian culture was the case of a white high school student in Utah who wore a traditional Chinese dress to prom. She said she wore the dress to show appreciation for Chinese culture and didn't intend any racism or cultural appropriation. And in 2019, New York City restaurant Lucky Lee's, which was owned by a white couple, came under fire for saying it served clean Chinese food that doesn't make diners bloated and icky. The owners have since apologized, and the restaurant shut down less than a year later.
The idea that Chinese food is greasy and unhealthy and cheap and sweet is because white Americans required that to allow Chinese people to survive, Chinese immigrants, and then to have that sort of thrown back in our face as like, this is why it's disgusting.
Many say the problem is that cultural appropriation exploits an aspect from a cultural group, while removing it from its history and ignoring the people behind it.
White America, the dominant culture, I suppose, takes the pieces of art they enjoy, profit from it, sanitize it for their consumption, continue to denigrate the people who actually originated it.
Many Asian Americans said the Mahjong Line followed this pattern.
It completely erased all of the history behind this game and how it's been played for centuries in East Asia.
Yanni was born in Hong Kong but grew up overseas. For her and many like her, memories of Mahjong are steeped in family tradition.
It's bonding time for us, and for me, somebody who grew up largely overseas and never really had many chances to see my extended family, that was the way I could bond, even if I didn't know the game.
Andrew agreed.
To me, as a Chinese American, it was almost always watching my family members, my dad in particular, play Mahjong, in the sort of separate smoky back room while the kids were running around. And apparently when I was a young kid, I would just say, who's winning? Who's winning? And he still says, who's winning whenever we're together at some point.
Despite the backlash, the Mahjong Line is continuing to sell their game sets. But for many Chinese Americans, Mahjong is fine, just the way it is.
It's a game played by old and young, wealthy or poor. It's a pastime for all walks of life, and it has been like that for centuries. It doesn't need to be marketed as the cool, hip thing to do in America, the new thing that's like super hot.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Johanna Lee.